Welcome to Let's Talk Portsmouth, a new communications enterprise developed by the City of Portsmouth's Marketing and Communications Division. If you're interested in Portsmouth news and information, public concerns, and other relevant topics that could impact your life, Let's Talk Portsmouth is the podcast for you. We'll talk city business, including interviews with city administrators, hold discussions with civic and community organizations, and converse with newsmakers from around the state on topics close to home and heart. Now, here's your host, Sharon Hoggart.
Good day, everyone. We've got a special treat in store for you with this episode of Let's Talk Portsmouth. I'm your host, Sharon Hoggart. Welcome. Back in January of 2022, the City of Portsmouth hired a new director of museums and tourism. After a couple of blizzards, city shutdowns, and finally resuming normal operations, Dr. Alexander Benitez, the new hire, began his tenure. We're going to give Dr. Benitez an opportunity to tell you more about his background and work during our interview. But first, take a listen to this important message.
Day singing can help you remember things, so here's some tips for parents out there during these tough times.
Number 1.
Make sure your kids wash their hands for 20 seconds after they've coughed or sneezed or been outside.
2.
Virtual play dates, social and physical distancing can help save lives.
3.
Tell them they're safe and show your love and pride. Yes, we'll get through this together. Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Let's Talk Portsmouth. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is Dr. Alexander Benitez, the new director of Portsmouth Museums and Tourism. Welcome aboard, Dr. Benitez, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've worked for more than 30 years at various state and university museums and the Smithsonian Institution. Tell our audience a little bit more about your background.
Okay. Well, I've had an interesting path to here, and I seem to say that at every new job I've had. I've always sort of taken on new challenges. My official training, or maybe just a quick background, I'm from the West Coast, born on the West Coast, raised in the Southwest, and went to school in Texas, and then moved out to the D.C. area, late 90s, stayed there for many, many years, then went down to, the University of Alabama, and then that's where I'm coming from. So in terms of geographics, I've moved across the country quite a bit. In terms of my professional background, I am trained as an anthropologist and archaeologist. That was my first or second passion. So I, initially did a lot of work with as an undergraduate at the University of Arizona. That's where my bachelor's degree is from. So really got into archaeology there. And really did a lot of just archaeological research for many years. Did a master's thesis at the University of Texas at Austin on southwestern pottery. My first, archaeological field schools were in central Arizona. And then in graduate school, I had an opportunity to go down, actually to work with the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History and work in central Mexico. So that was a diversion there, and did my dissertation in Central American archaeology down in the Toluca Valley and just west of Mexico City. It just really thought that would be the path that I would follow. I was working in museum environments still with the Arizona State Museum at the University of Arizona, and then with the Smithsonian, doing essentially field research, and then little by little sort of transitioned to working with museum collections. So I did my dissertation in what we call obsidian or volcanic glass in central Mexico. Mm-hmm. But then had an opportunity once I finished my graduate studies to work with the National Museum of the American Indian, right about the time it was getting started, and they were doing the initial research for the exhibits. That museum opened in 2004, and at that time I was working, fortunate to get a teaching position with George Mason University in Northern Virginia. So as an assistant professor, still doing, field research. And then I started transitioning to museum work, working in museum collections at the NMAI at that point. I'd left there. The museum had opened. I started working in those collections, still retain that strong relationship with them. And then, really got into this idea that museum collections were still worth researching. We had a lot of people out there doing field work, but there were great collections that still needed to be researched. So had great opportunity, and I thank the staff at the NMAI. They were really open to having me and my students at George Mason work in their collections. So we did a lot of really good work for them, and ultimately did a project on Central American pottery that really dove into their extensive, amazing collection of Central American pottery, with the goal of improving that collection so that it was more accessible, and it really built a really great professional network of folks throughout the country and Latin America to really celebrate that collection, but also make it accessible to folks in those areas working on it. So, that really pushed me into the world of museum collections and all the interesting things that go with it. When I decided to, really enter the museum field again full time, I accepted a position down at the University of Alabama in a very unique place where, we had an archaeological site, we had a museum, a great museum that had been renovated, and then I was still affiliated with the university, so I was still teaching. So, then that's when I jumped in sort of the administrative side of museum work, and then coming here, of course, allowed me to then take that on to a different level where I'm overseeing several museums. So really, I've sort of gone the gamut from field research to collections research to museum work in a university environment to now, museum work in a city government environment, which I'm really enjoying.
Okay.
So that's the long version of a short answer.
That's okay. And you answered my first question. How did you find yourself applying for the museum's director position in Portsmouth? So I think you kind of gave us a background on that. And so how's it going so far?
It's great. I will say I have the best staff I could have hoped for here. They're dynamic. They are passionate, hardworking, and they've been very welcoming. So I've enjoyed, getting to know the staff here. I've also enjoyed getting to know the citizens of Portsmouth. I've had great experiences since the first day I arrived. My neighbors helped me move in. I moved in the day before that first snowstorm. My Cox Cable guy gave me a whole. I said he was. I've been telling people he's the best tour guide for Portsmouth. He told me everything about what I needed to know about the city.
Wow.
And he was a great advocate for, the city. And I just am seeing that everywhere.
And you just send me his
really great
name.
Experience.
Send us his name. We're going to reach out to him.
I do not remember his name, but I feel like he should be credited. I do have his card.
Okay.
But he was wonderful because, we talked a little bit about the issues with my home. I purchased a home here and getting that set up. And then, he was really an advocate for the city, and he had moved from Virginia Beach to Portsmouth. And it was just, amazing to see people say that you made a really good decision. This is a great place. And I hear that everywhere. And so I feel really privileged to have been invited to be here and as the museum director.
All right, tech guys, you heard that. We're going to play that 2 or 3 times within this podcast. You mentioned that you held a position as a professor of anthropology at George Mason University in Northern Virginia. For those of us who've been out of school for a while, what's involved in the study of anthropology?
Sure. Anthropology is just sort of generally the study of people and cultures. And the general way of thinking about it, the old school way of thinking about it is a 4-field approach where, people like myself who studied people and culture through, ancient cities and artifacts as archaeologists. You have anthropologists who, were called cultural anthropologists who study contemporary peoples. And then you have bioarchaeologists who study, things like primates and evolution and, the ancient past. And even in archaeology, we have bioanthropologists, but we have bioarchaeologists who study things like disease in ancient people and cultures to better understand those cultures. We also have people who study language. So there's a wide range of things that are under the study of anthropology that are sort of focused subfields, but generally it's the study of people and cultures.
Any particular reason why you decided to study anthropologists? Did you have other anthropologists in your family?
No, and no other anthropologists in my family. And I think if it were up to my parents back in the day, they would have still said no because they didn't understand what anthropology was either. And I can tell you that, I love telling the story because I used to tell it to my students all the time, which is that, you never know what's going to drive your passions and what opportunities are going to, make you aware of what those passions are. For me, studying anthropology was almost sort of an accident, and I have referred to myself in the past as sort of an accidental archaeologist in the sense that I thought I was going to be an architect. I was in a pre-architecture program as an undergraduate, and I had a work study, funding, so I had to find a position. So I would go to the boards in our forget which building it was, but you go and you look at the positions that you could apply for, and that was your financial aid. So I kept seeing the library. And I was like, well, I could go work in the library. And then one day I saw a post for somebody who could draft maps for an archaeological project. And so I said, well, I took drafting in high school. Let's go see what that is. I can draft them. I can draw a map, right? And that pulled me into a project. It's a great project called the Homology Research Project out of the Arizona State Museum. And that's what I did initially, is just draft maps for them that are in publications. And, that opened up a world that I never would have thought. I mean, I lived in the Southwest. I knew Native American culture was all around us. I knew there were, you could go out in the washes and every now and then you'd find a piece of pottery. So I knew that there was an ancient and rich Native history there. But the idea of doing it as a profession was not something that I knew where to do or how to do. And so I was welcomed into this project with graduate students doing great projects and other undergraduates like myself, studying rocks and pottery. And it just, it was that thing. It was that, opportunity that just opened up the world to me in a way that I probably didn't think I would encounter. So to me, that was my introduction to anthropology. And it's, it wasn't something that was natural to me or to my family. So it was, I would say it was, had to justify that because, being a business major has very direct outcomes. Being an architect has very direct outcomes.
Yep.
When you're doing anthropology, the questions you get are, well,
what are you going to do with
that old stuff, right? Who's going to pay you to do that, right? So.
Yeah. You talked earlier about some of the projects that you've worked on, and you worked on some exciting ones. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about the Ancestral Pueblo site that you worked in the U.S. Southwest?
Sure. So again, it was part of the homology research program out of the University of Arizona, and it's a series of sites are now state protected sites up in just north of Winslow, Arizona. It's a series of sites called homology 1, 2. They have names, and then there's a series of them, but they're some of the largest were 1,000-room pueblos with plazas in the middle and 3 or 4 story buildings all the way around. And it was fascinating. We call them Ancestral Pueblo. We call them Ancestral Hopi. They're connected to the Hopi people that live north on the Hopi Mesas in northern Arizona. And so these sites were very well documented as being some of the last stops before the Hopi migrated up to the Hopi Mesas. And so, to me, what was great about that project is you could see the ancient culture, and it was all around, and the pottery is beautiful, and it was, clearly there was something really important happening there. And we worked really closely with the Hopi. And so we had a lot of Hopi elders who worked with I was an undergraduate, so I was learning all this, but, with the archaeologists there, the Hopi were really working closely with the project. And I think that was an important lesson for me early on to learn, was that, the Native American people who are still here have connections, deep connections to the archaeology that we do. And so we've got to, respect that in a lot of different ways. And so, that site to me was really super exciting. For one, I went from drafting maps to being asked to help in a lab for the summer. So I had a summer job doing archaeology, and then suddenly it's like, well, maybe this is a real thing you can do. And then you're discovering things, and as somebody who's always interested in finding things, whether it was shells on the beach or whatever, the idea that you could understand something or discover something that will tell you about something in the past. I remember doing something we call flotation, which you take dirt samples and you put it in water, and all the organics sort of float to the top, and that's what you want, because it tells you a little bit. You might find seeds, you might find things, other things that tell you about what was going on at that site. Well, I did, that, and we found hundreds of tiny, tiny little turquoise beads that had fallen through. And to me, that was, pretty exciting. We're hundreds of them that were just happened to be in that sample, and it's part of whatever they're excavating. I don't even remember what unit it was. I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, look at even just a bucket of dirt, pulled from the site can tell you so much. So for me, that was really, the interesting thing about archaeology is that idea of discovery and the idea that people in the past, existed in ways that we don't understand, but were dynamic, that they were artists. They were, we think about basic subsistence practices, but things like religion, things like, status, and the things that we still talk about today are really important to them too. So that was important for me. So that Homology Research Project it's still ongoing. 40 years, and that project is still going. So,
wow.
I'm sure a lot of archaeologists have gotten their start through volunteering or working on that project.
And you may have answered my next question, but you talked about that the soil samples that you were involved in. Give us some details about what goes into the preservation and cultural interpretation of these sites that are being excavated and studied.
Well, so and it's a good question. It's a kind of a, you say, you're preserving a site, but you're excavating it. Archaeology by nature is a destructive practice, right? So when you're excavating a site, you're never going to be able to put it back together. So what does that mean? How do you preserve a site and still do research? And I think that's where archaeology has come a long way over, the last 100 plus years, where we, what you look at is learn as much as you can, but doing the least amount of damage. And today we have technologies that help us either focus the kind of destructive analysis that we do, so that we only excavate, the things that need to be excavated. We don't excavate an entire site, just to find out what's going on, just to ask broad questions. Now the questions we ask are very focused, but also, there are a lot of new technologies that we can use in archaeology that actually help us look into the soil and get data from the soil without actually having to destroy it. Things like ground penetrating radar have been around for a very long time that allow us to see anomalies in the soil, so we can see, there's a room there, but we're not going to excavate it. But we can tell there's some kind of structure there. Maybe we do want to excavate it, but we'll do it very carefully and very intentionally, rather than just a wholesale. Excavation, and also funding, plays a part of that too. We don't have the money to excavate an entire site. So all this helps towards that goal, but also preservation. And then we have technologies like LiDAR today, which, you can find on your vacuum, but 10 years ago, it was such a new technology. But this idea that you can go into, forests and use this laser technology from either, now we can do it on drones, but they used to do flyovers on planes and see through the vegetation and, previously undiscovered, cities in places like Mexico or Guatemala or the Amazon forest, now, come to life, because using that laser technology, it allows you to see through that vegetation, and you can very clearly see entire cities. And so, that in one sense is preservation as well. We're learning something about the past, but we're doing it in a way that least impacts that site. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, Dr. Benitez, stay with us. We're going to take another short break. Everyone stay with us. We'll be right back.
What is dedication?
The thing that drives me every day as a dad is Dariana. We call him Day Day for short. Every day he's hungry for something, whether it's attention, affection, knowledge. And there's this huge responsibility in making sure that when he's no longer under my wing, that he's a good person. I want him to be able to sit back one day and go, we worked together, we did a good job.
That's dedication. Find out more at fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Okay, everybody, we're back. We're talking with Dr. Alexander Benitez, Director of Portsmouth Museums and Tourism. Dr. Benitez, as you've been navigating your way through the Portsmouth Museums and Tourism Department and the city organization, what kind of activities have you been involved in?
Well, I have been learning quite a bit. Most of what I've been doing is meeting with staff, listening, just trying to understand what our museum system does, how it functions. And I do have to say, and I have to give a lot of credit to Nancy Perry, who left some pretty big shoes to fill here as the director of museums. She was here for a very long time. And we saw the museums transition through, something that was very different than what it is today. And it's pretty amazing what she was able to do in her time here. So for me, it's initially been just understanding, how our museums function. A lot of assessment, I guess I would say, and so the activities I've been involved in is just to learn as much as possible. And I will say that my staff has been great, and also the city leadership has been great. Working with our deputy city manager and our city manager is incredibly supportive, and I can't thank them enough for providing me, the opportunity to lead this. I think I come in at a very interesting and great time of Portsmouth's history. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of really dynamic things going on, and we want to be a part of that as very visible museum system. And so a lot I've been doing is networking, assessment, trying to figure out what we do well, what we want to do better, and what kinds of innovative things we can do to really bring our museums to another level and reach all the stakeholders who are important to us. And that's tourists, that is our local communities, our regional visitors. So really it's been a lot of that.
Okay. So over the next 60 days or so, have you got an outline and things you plan to do in the new job?
Yeah, I'm trying to be a little flexible there. I think over the next 60 days, I'd like to be able to, develop a vision for where our museums is headed based on all of the assessment that I just talked about doing. I would like to see us do a lot more with our community. And I think that's one of the things, our local communities and reaching out into our neighborhoods, and just making our museums a lot more accessible. Just coming up with a plan and a vision for how to do that. And again, great staff here at the museums with great ideas. And so a lot of what I've been doing is just learning about what we have done, the ideas they have, individually for moving forward, and then that's what we'll do, is develop our plan for the future. But I know there's a lot of things still. I come in sort of the middle, so there's a lot still to be done that was already in the plans, and so we, I'm trying to get my feet under me, I guess is the best way to say it. Yeah, but it's been much easier than I thought because of the staff support and the city's support.
Okay, you've answered that next question. You're so intuitive. Okay, so are you, even in your new job, are you working on any other kind of research since landing in Portsmouth, perhaps a project that you started earlier?
I would say, well, the short answer is no, in part because, there's been so much here to catch up with and understand and sort of, the research side of things are, that's such a commitment. And so I would eventually like to get back to some research. I'm not that far from some of the research I was doing in the Washington, D.C. area. But honestly, I think, so much right now has been about figuring out what we do well here, and what we want to do better. One thing I will say, though, as it pertains to research, is I would like us to as a museum system, to really think about, really celebrating who we are as the city of Portsmouth and all of our diverse communities. And I most of what I've done has been related to Native American culture, and I would like to see us do a little bit more of that and acknowledge those communities that are in this area, and also other communities that we have. So I think if I was thinking about research, I think the research I would first focus on is who we are, as a demographic in this area, and what are the communities that are part of our stakeholders, and celebrate those, and bring those to our museums as well. I think that connected to my research anyway. That would be something I would do as an anthropologist, but also someone who does has always studied Native American cultures. I'd like to highlight kinds of events or exhibits that talk about those communities as well.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen the Rooting for the Home Team exhibit at the Portsmouth Colored Library Museum yet?
Yes.
Okay, I have it on good authority that the exhibit was curated by Portsmouth Museum staff. What do you think about it?
I thought the exhibit was done incredibly well. I was very pleased with how it was produced in the content as a museum exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about it. I think as an important part of our history, a difficult part of our history, in some way that you have to acknowledge. It was to think about. I'm sure you've seen the exhibit too, but to think about, something as American as baseball, as being segregated, the difficult, thing for I think a lot of people today to really understand. I think the exhibit does a great job of showing not only how you can tell that story and tell it well, but you can also focus on talking about how much and how important baseball was for the Portsmouth community. It was super dynamic, and I think everybody in Portsmouth should go see it. I really it's a great exhibit, and I would like to see that. I know it's through 2023, but if there was one thing I would like to do is to see that exhibit find a place somewhere else a little more permanently and see it expanded even.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball was everything in Portsmouth in the 40s and 50s and 60s. If you read that exhibit, and to see a community kind of come together around that sport, despite the negative reasons that it was necessary, is amazing. And I think again, I'll credit the museum staff here. They did a great job with putting that together as an exhibit. It's very well done. And as a history, it's an important one to tell, and that's something I hope we continue to do. Again, like we talked about earlier, I think it's those kinds of stories that we need to bring out, because it's about us, it's about Portsmouth, and it's stories we need to tell.
And here's another shameful plug for Let's Talk Portsmouth. In our next segment, we're going to be talking to Sam Allen, who is a legend in the Negro Baseball League. We're going to be talking to him in our next episode.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking forward to hopefully meeting him.
Yeah, he's really excited about it, and so are we. This is going to be fun. We're going to have his. He was connected to another member of the Negro Baseball League, whose grandfather was the grandfather of one of our colleagues, and so we got his two daughters and Mr. Allen. So we'll be talking to them in the next couple of hours or so. So it's going to be really a great interview.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So in all of your studies, your research, and your professional accomplishments, what has intrigued you most about human beings, societies, and cultures?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. That's a big question. But you know what? It's a question I've been asked before, and it's something I haven't answered. I think it's resilience. Human beings, societies, and cultures. As societies and cultures, they come and go. Over time, over history, we know that archaeologically, we know that historically. But human beings as a whole are pretty resilient, and we find ways to continue. We find ways we reorganize our societies. We develop new cultures from others or entirely new ideas of who we are and how we're going to exist. We know that over time. And in one place you can have, a sequence of that goes, 10,000 years or so, right? Especially here in the New World. And we have evidence for that. And it's fascinating to me that as human beings, we are resilient and we persist. And I think as long as you hang on to that idea that we are resilient, there's hope. So the things that seem immediately difficult, you got to remember that, as who we are as people, we're pretty resilient, and we have encountered difficulties, and we know that again through some of the research that we do over time. But people adapt, people move on, and people do other things. Our ancient cultures here in the New World are connected very much to the native people who are still here today, and yet they went through many, many changes to be where they are, right? Or who they are today. So I think that's what intrigues me most about just human nature in general, or human beings, is that we're pretty resilient.
Okay. Great answer. Okay, guys, I got another program note for you. Sam Allen, again from the Negro Baseball League, we're going to do a remarkable Portsmouth piece that kind of wrapped around another event that the museums had about to take me rooting for the home team exhibit. So that's coming up pretty soon. That will air on PCTV, channel 48 on the Cox system, and channel 39 if you got the great files. Stay with us, folks. We're going to take one last short break for this public service announcement, and then we're going to wrap it up.
How do airplanes fly? What's in this box? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Learn how to store your gun securely and make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Dr. Benitez, thank you so much again for talking with us today. It has been a true joy. We here at Let's Talk Portsmouth have learned more about you and your work and about the study of anthropology. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave with our listening audience?
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. It's easy to always talk about, who we are and what we do and how we got to here. But it's also nice to start a new position with questions that talk about where you want to take us, And so I would just say that, I hope everyone who hears this or anyone who's in our general region really does come out and visit our museums. They're here for you. And we're trying to be innovative and do new things, and we'd like to make them an exciting part of, Portsmouth.
All righty. Thank you so much. Well, that's it, folks. Thank you for listening to our podcast. As we continue this journey called life, remember, for success, attitude is equally as important as ability. Walter Scott said that. We're out of here.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Portsmouth, the podcast that's about the city of Portsmouth and our connections around the globe. Listen and download our next episode for more news you can use and information that may just change your perspective. Find our podcast where you find quality podcasts, the Podbean app, Spotify, and Amazon Music Audible. Until next time, take care.